This is a true story about a Seneca Lake cemetery where the bodies of more than 5,000 souls lie in graves with no names, just numbers, and about its famous gravedigger. The former New York State Mental Hospital on Seneca Lake, now simply referred to as Willard, has gone by a few names in the past. Willard opened in 1869 as Willard Asylum for the Chronically Insane, a hospital for people with mental illness formerly housed at county poorhouses. By 1877, Willard was the largest asylum in the United States. And in 1995, Willard Psychiatric Center closed its doors for treatment, but then a portion of it opened as a prison for addicts. But that's closed for now too, and the place is a ghost town. I made a video about its history, so if you haven't seen it, I've posted the link below. For more than a century, patients were admitted, or should I say sent or sentenced to Willard, as wards of the state for being crazy. And most lived out their lives there, never able to leave. This is the story of one patient who wanted to leave, but never did, the Willard Gravedigger. He, along with more than 5,000 other people, lived, died, and are now buried there. I checked out a book from the library called The Lives They Left Behind, Suitcases from a State Hospital Attic by Darby Penny and Peter Stansky. When Willard closed in 1995 as a psych hospital, after 126 years in operation, it was home to more than 54,000 people. About that time, some 400 suitcases were discovered in attics with patients' belongings, which led to a study, then a museum exhibit, and then this book. So chapter 1 is entitled, He Took Them on Their Last Walk. And I'm going to do my best to summarize this chapter for you in the video. I encourage you to get and read this whole book, as this is just one little tiny piece to a very big puzzle of Willard history. This is the story of the man who became the gravedigger. In the book, he's referred to as Lawrence Merrick, but I found out later that wasn't even his real name. New York State's privacy laws required that the book authors used a pseudonym because they didn't have permission from the family to use his real name. More about that later. Discovered in his deteriorating brown leather suitcase were 2 pairs of shoes, 2 shaving mugs, a shaving brush, and suspenders. He was born in 1870 in an area of Austria near Poland. Around the year 1900, he received a very serious head injury from a stone throw. He began drinking heavily, and he was admitted to an asylum near Germany for, quote, singing, whistling, and being generally noisy. Apparently, alcohol made him loud, and he accused himself of sinning, and he prostrated himself with attitudes of prayer. He stayed there about a year before enlisting in the German Army. In 1907, at the age of 29, he immigrated to the United States and somehow ended up working as a window washer at Bellevue Hospital on the psych unit in New York City, where he was employed. Then he became a patient because he was, quote, singing and shouting and whistling in a boisterous manner. He did have a drinking problem, and entries at Bellevue stated that he was confused and depressed. He had self-accusatory ideas and continually assumed attitudes of prayer. He was struggling with a head injury, religious guilt, and spiritual turmoil. But the doctors didn't take him seriously, and they decided he was crazy and confined him to Bellevue as a patient. Well, after some time out, he was eventually transferred to Willard in May 1918, and he was known as patient 14956. He tended to be volatile and occasionally attacked other patients when they bothered him, but he was otherwise reclusive. Records report that he enjoyed physical labor and worked best when left alone. He's shown in this photo from an old scrapbook as patient number 92262. In 1945, after 27 years of labor at the state hospital, at the age of 67, he wrote a letter to the hospital superintendent requesting his release. Remember, English was his second language. It states, October 19th, 1945, Dr. Kyle, I hereby, Lawrence Mocha, stop work. Yesterday afternoon, I asked you, doctor, to discharge me from Willard Institution. I am capable to do my living independently. I want also to get money for my work here. I make over 8 years more than 500 graves. Myself, another heavy work all year round. I asked doctor to prepare my trunk, which I brought here from Central Islip. Is my own. I brought it in Dusseldorf. I am respectfully yours, Lawrence. Up until his death at age 90, he took full responsibility for the patient graveyard. He apparently liked the work and was very meticulous. Lawrence worked nearly every day in every kind of weather in the patient cemetery, digging graves by hand with a pickaxe and shovel. One doctor noted that he was happy and that he'd found a home there. He was actually treated with a level of prestige. And as he grew older, he showed fewer and fewer signs of psychiatric problems. He seemed like a staff member more than a patient. Yet the policy there was, you don't leave. You're a ward of the state. Plus, he didn't have any other family to go to. In 1963, a medical note from a Dr. Hugg said, "This 85-year-old patient is an excellent worker in the cemetery. He has just grown old in this hospital. He has a heavy accent and therefore may be hard to understand at times. He is fully oriented, has no delusional trends, and denies sense deceptions. He shows no psychopathology whatsoever. But after 47 years of hospitalization, he seems to have no other chance but to remain in the hospital, and he actually does like it. His general health is good, and his medication is none." When the suitcase book was written, his last name was reported to be Merrick, but his real name is Lawrence Mocha, even though it's unknown exactly where his body is buried. He's laid to rest there somewhere, assigned to yet another number. But his name was Lawrence Mocha, under a majestic tree on the site where his shed once stood. There's a large boulder there now, surrounded by stones, flowers, and a shovel secured in the ground, and there's a plaque affixed to the boulder listing his name and birth and death dates, and it reads, "The Gravedigger." In his half-century as a Willard patient, Lawrence dug over 1,500 graves of his fellow patients who are buried in the cemetery that they might have a final resting place long after the world had forgotten them. Thanks for watching.